Yeah, morning, Ashley. Morning, Cathryn.
Hi.
And Darren, of course, my colleague. We're going to have a sort of bit of a chat today about the Bath experience of being the first authority outside of London to implement a clean air zone enforcement. We obviously work with yourselves already for sort of debt recovery for your PCNs. And I'm not too far away, and I've had the pleasure of visiting Bath in the last couple of weeks, and I've seen the scheme firsthand. So yeah, it's of interest certainly to me, because I'll be probably popping down to Bath quite often over the next 3 years as my daughter's going to university, but also for many of our other clients, the likes of Birmingham, who are going live in a couple of weeks' time with their own scheme. So I mean, if we hand over to you and you can sort of kick us off, and we'll have a chat around your experiences.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Would it help to start with just run through a short video which kind of summarises the scheme? It's one that's been on our website for a while now, and maybe provides a useful introduction for people.
Yeah, that'd be great. We run that.
From the 15th of March, you may have to pay to drive in central Bath to help tackle harmful pollution. Private cars and motorbikes will not be charged, but other higher emission vehicles will. To find out if you need to pay, search online for Clean Air Zone and use the gov.uk vehicle checker. If charges apply, then from midnight on the 15th of March, if you drive in the zone, you must pay within 7 days at gov.uk, or you could receive a penalty charge. We're already helping hundreds of local drivers to upgrade to cleaner vehicles so they don't need to pay. Exemptions are also available. Let's all work together for cleaner, healthier air. To find out more, go to bathnes.gov.uk/BathCas.
I do love the Bath infographics. You've done quite a few of those. I saw some of the sort of how to drive, how to use the park and ride. So yeah, they're really nice and snappy. So do you want to sort of set the scene and how you sort of arrived as the first out of London authority, and share a bit of your experience of how things have gone and how it's been sort of perceived by the public?
Yeah, I can do. Shall I sort of start with about the purpose of a clean air zone and all the various different classes and what have you? I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that sort of thing. Well, clean air zones, they're being introduced up and down the country, aren't they? We've got clean air zones obviously in Bath. Birmingham's coming live shortly. They're talking about a zone and working hard on a zone in Manchester. So they are, and Portsmouth is also coming online, I think later on this year, in fact. So they are going to become a thing. We are going to have to get used to them. But kind of why are they a thing? Really, the crux of it is to drive down the emissions, particularly nitrogen dioxide emissions. Or Kathy, you might be able to be more specific, nitrogen oxide emissions or oxides of nitrogen emissions. In these sort of built-up areas, with a view to improving the health of residents, improving the general environment as well. What we're really looking to do in Bath with a clean air zone, as it says, it's a physical and geographic zone where we are targeting particular groups of vehicles. And trying to encourage those vehicles to upgrade to something that is essentially less polluting. What you might have if you've got certain vehicle types is you might also have the opportunity for mode shift. So you might try and move those journeys from a vehicle, for example, onto the bus, or walking or cycling, all that sort of thing. There are effectively 4 classes of clean air zone, which are nattily categorised A, B, C and D. We in Bath have a Class C clean air zone, which means that the way we tend to frame it is that everything is charged except private cars. Birmingham is doing, for example, a Class D clean air zone, which means that basically everything is charged. And as I say, what we're trying to do is encourage that behaviour change. Now, clearly, we have to be sensitive to the fact that some people and potentially some vehicles may not be able to adapt that quickly. So we do have exemptions in place for certain groups and for certain vehicle types. So that's all part of making sure that the zone is fair and kind of reasonable, I suppose. And what we also have is a very extensive support package, which is helping people to upgrade their vehicles perhaps sooner than they would do otherwise. Essentially, that's what it's for. So we're effectively making up the difference, in the cost of upgrading that vehicle, perhaps when it was planned to be replaced, and replacing it now to try and make it compliant with the kind of rules of the clean air zone. So kind of that's the key to it. We were directed by government to do this, and the other authorities that are talking about doing clean air zones are the same. However, there are other authorities who are now taking this on board more on a kind of voluntary basis. So Oxford, for example, are looking at introducing a low emission zone and then an ultra low emission zone, I believe. And it may be that this becomes a thing not only for authorities that are directed, but also for authorities that choose to, off their own back, as it were, improve the kind of environments in their city centres, as we go forward.
Yeah, it sounds. Thank you, Ashley. And I think there's a lot of obviously determining factors that go into obviously deciding, like I say, introduction from government and sort of the directive to introduce these new measures and new activities within different cities and towns and so on. And we know, as you said, a lot of councils are currently looking into clean air and how they can make their cities and towns a lot safer from the different gases and so on. Can I just ask how the geographical area of Bath was decided? So how far out from the city centre do you go? Was there some science put in behind that?
Shall I take that one?
Yeah.
So we first started this process back in July 2017. So that is an indication of the complexity of a project of this sort. It's taken 3.5 years, albeit there has been a pandemic in the middle of that as well. So we started formally consulting in 2018, and our goal in terms of defining the boundary was to ensure that we covered those areas that were had problems with high levels of nitrogen dioxide, but we also had to be very sensitive to the local economy and to our vulnerable residents as well. So we had to come up with a kind of a balance whereby the zone covered those areas that were suffering from poor air quality, but we tried to keep it as small as possible to try and minimise the economic impact as much as we could. So from the outset, we have taken the mantra to really have conversations with people and to talk to people. Clean air zones are a very complex and technical subject for the general public to get their heads round. And whilst you can put out lots of written information and lovely websites, really to achieve the commitment and understanding you need to talk to people. So we did our first formal consultation around the zone. I think it was in the autumn of 2018. It was a very intense 6-week period, a period I will never forget. We did lots of public surgeries. We had lots of conversations. But we really wanted to put ourselves out there and to talk to people, and then it elicited over 8,000 responses to our consultation. Wow. It remains the record for the most responded to consultation that the council's ever done, and various things came out of that, one of which was concern around the impact that a Class D zone would have on vulnerable people in the local economy. So that was put to our administration, and they opted to choose a Class C clean air zone, which did not include charging private cars for those reasons. So we did further consultation on that around our full business case stage, and the business case was finally signed off in January 2020. So again, that indicates how long that business case development process took us. As Ashley said, we have a very innovative financial assistance scheme. We recognise that there is an enforcement element to a clean air zone, so you need to have a kind of a carrot to balance your stick of the enforcement. Residents, businesses, if they're driving into the zone often enough in a non-compliant vehicle, can apply for either a grant or an interest-free loan to either upgrade their vehicle to a compliant vehicle, or indeed choose a retrofit option. So they keep their existing vehicle but have it retrofitted so it becomes it has cleaner technology to make it compliant. The financial assistance scheme has been a real success. We anticipate putting around 1,500 applicants through that scheme, and I think it's fair to say, you know, just prior to launch and since, we have been very busy with those applications. People recognising it's a very generous offer and are taking up that opportunity. So that's been good. Obviously, we launched our scheme on the 15th of March, which coincided with COVID restrictions being lifted. So we have had to be sensitive to that and recognise that we have businesses who have been really struggling through the pandemic. So we have been a bit more flexible around exemptions and things like that to help those businesses restart and also ensure that they can get compliant vehicles to drive into the zone.
I think you have to be congratulated for sort of for pressing ahead during obviously very difficult times and leapfrogging a few of those other authorities that sort of were due to go live a while ago and have been delayed slightly. But you certainly leapfrogged some of the large metropolitan sort of authorities. As you say, they seem to sort of fall into a couple of categories where you've got the very large schemes like the Birminghams and Manchesters that cover a huge sort of geographic area. And then I know sort of Oxford are also sort of thinking of something very similar, you know, almost a zero emission zone and a very small sort of zone. And I think sort of some of the historic cities such as yourself and Oxford and maybe others like, you know, York or Cambridge will follow suit very soon, because obviously your road network is one of the constraining factors. How do you find sort of, you know, the sign, you know, around a particularly historic sort of town of Bath, you know, the signage and conveying that message that sort of people need to know as they drive into the city? Was that a challenge?
It was. So as we developed the business case, as we go kind of through the various stages of that, the signage strategy evolved. As did the boundary. The boundary evolved as well, to be honest, you know, as we went through and we talked with people, we made adaptations and all the rest of it. And the signage strategy sort of came together. We've got signage at the boundary. So as you enter the zone or leave the zone, we've got intermediate signage inside the zone at key points, which is an important point because there may be people who are driving around sort of in the zone who wouldn't otherwise, you know, see any signage at all. And then as we approach the zone, we've got advanced signage, I think in two or three layers, particularly 3 layers potentially in most locations actually. So there's good for, you know, kind of forewarning at key points that there is a charging clean air zone coming up, which then gives people the opportunity to divert or turn back or whatever they want to do at that particular point in time. And we've had to be very careful in designing those, you know, that they are, you know, potential turn back points, not only for smaller vehicles, but also for the larger vehicles as well, to give those people an opportunity to adjust their journey or their routing, I suppose.
So I've been to the town a couple of weeks ago and obviously knew that you'd gone live, but the signs were pretty sort of clear to me. And I've actually been onto the government website and checked my vehicle and I'm all compliant and don't need to pay because obviously I'm a private motorist. But I notice I hadn't been on there before, that Birmingham's now on there as well. So it tells you all of the cities under the scheme. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
I think one thing for me is listening to you, Cathryn, like the timescale that goes into this. Like I say, back sort of years ago, this project started, and it takes all that time and effort just to get to that point of implementation and so on. I think that's something that people don't really probably appreciate, that all those determining factors, they just think it's a clean air zone and a couple of signs up and that's it, job's a good one. Like, you sort of run away with it and go with it. So I think that's sort of really sort of underappreciated across the project and what you're doing and so on. So can I ask, like, so obviously implementation was the 15th of March, going ahead with it now. How do you determine the success of the clean air zone? Because like you say, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of people, a lot of effort gone into the implementation of this. So how do you determine the success, and will it ever evolve? Will it stay the same and continue like that, or is there an involvement with that?
I suppose there's some very obvious success factors that we've got to achieve. So the main one being that we are here to improve the air quality in the city. We have an extensive monitoring network to monitor nitrogen dioxide levels, and we are looking to report on that on a quarterly basis going forward. But there are other measures as well around, fleet makeup, traffic flows, any impact on the local economy, and perhaps less obvious, less tangible kind of measures that we are looking at. And then there's other, what I would say, qualitative measures. So if you think about it, this is a huge behaviour change process for the people in businesses in and around Bath. And I think anybody thinking about implementing a clean air zone needs to really think about that seriously, because, as you say, it takes a long time, and it takes a long time because you have to bring people with you and you have to get their understanding and commitment, and you've got to move them from that initial angry shock phase of why are you doing this to a more experimental accepting phase. And I would say sort of we're now 2 months in, and we are beginning to see people now into that acceptance stage. Whilst we're still getting, a large number of customer contacts, it's more questions about, well, how do I do this? How do I pay that? So it's becoming business as usual for people. So I think that's a really good indicator for us as well. And also the success of our financial assistance scheme, the number of vehicles that we can upgrade and move to compliant versions. And then, as you say, how will it evolve? Well, our zone doesn't include private cars, but that isn't to say that we've forgotten about cars. We very much want to speak to car owners and car drivers and ensure that they learn about other options that they have available to get around our city, walking, cycling, public transport, whatever. So, after all the investment and time that we have put into introducing this, we very much see it as kind of the first step, and it will evolve. And I don't know how it will evolve at the moment, but I think for Bath, this is saying to the rest of the country, we take air quality seriously. We want to do something significant and positive around that, and we're beginning on that journey. And as I say, in speaking to the general public, more and more people are accepting of that now.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to the general public, you'd like to think that sort of enforcing sort of air quality becomes as important as enforcing, people driving with a mobile phone or parking outside of a school. But it sort of takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And I guess, like those other types of enforcement, there's been a little bit of a spike before that sort of compliance kicks in. I know it's very early days, you're sort of a little over a month in, but are you seeing sort of increased sort of compliance levels already, or is that yet to come?
I think it's probably yet to come, to be fair. I think it's very early days. There are people out there who are still understanding the scheme and how it impacts them. And you also have to understand that we're coming out of a pandemic and people have had other things to think about. So we are very much there continuing to support them. And to be fair to them, the majority of people want to be compliant. But various other factors, so for example, the supply of vans at the moment is tricky because of the pandemic and things like that. So we do need to give people extra time, but they will get there.
We've done also, Paul, a period of soft enforcement.
Yes.
So whilst we did, I think quite unusually actually, government's been very keen working with DVLA to issue out what they've called early notice letters to people, and I think Birmingham's currently going through that process. Which is a really great way to raise awareness. We also, on top of that, did a period of soft enforcement where we were just asking people to pay the zone charge if they received a PCN. That is coming to an end, but I think that's been really helpful as well, because then it allowed us to have that conversation with somebody, and just recover the zone charge. And we have to recover the zone charge because there are people paying the zone charge. So, kind of that's the equitable thing to do, rather than sort of waive the PCN, which is what you might do in a sort of parking or bus lane scenario, perhaps. But I think that's been an incredibly useful exercise, as I say, in engagement with people. I thought what was interesting, Kath, was what our kind of team lead said this morning about the fact that, when you do parking, you get instant gratification because you paid for something, and so it's quite interesting, this one. There is a lot more education, there is a lot more behaviour change in it, because you're paying for something, but you kind of say, well, what am I paying for?
I can't see it.
Clean air, can't see it.
Yeah, and the results of it, we've got, there's quite a lot of science behind it. We're not going to see the results of it for a period of time. So that's also a really interesting factor for people in terms of that public acceptance piece and that behaviour change piece, is they might not see the benefit of what they're paying for now, until a few months hence. So we need to bear all those sorts of factors in mind.
I guess that education will carry on for some time to come, because particularly again going back to the pandemic, people staycating and things, and Bath being a real tourist hotspot. I'm sure you're going to be sort of very busy this year, which is great for the local economy. But all these people sort of heading towards Bath sort of need to sort of be educated throughout the rest of the year, I guess. New sort of tourists heading your way.
Yeah, I think we're fairly lucky in Bath that because we're not charging private cars, the people that come via that route, we do get a lot of people come via train and via coach. Will largely, I'm going to use the word escape charges, but let's say not be charged. But we are at the moment, actually, funnily enough, we are adding, Jan's adding a page to our website, Kath, isn't she, to kind of a page dedicated to tourists, as it were.
Tour operators and things, yeah.
So that car drivers recognise that they won't be charged. So that's, it's not something not to worry about. That we've got discounts for people with larger motorhomes. That motorhomes that are classed as M1 vehicles, so are classed as sort of private, passenger cars, won't be charged. What the rules are for coach operators and all that sort of thing, so that it's all really clear for those groups, and we don't as far as we can upset the sort of the tourist business, which Bath to a large extent relies on.
Yeah,
I think like Paul said earlier, I think it's a massive congratulations to yourselves and the team that was involved in the implementation of something like this, because I mean, we've said it all the way along, sort of what goes into this and different elements and surrounding factors and so on is just mad. I mean, it's been an education, I think, for me and all of us really to understand like what goes into it, time and effort and so on. And I mean, I'm confident people have their own unique questions to their own towns and cities and so on as they move forward. But sort of other than time and effort, and I'm sure plenty of coffee along the route, what would be your single bit of advice if someone was told within the local authority, you need to implement a clean air zone? There you go. What would it be?
Well, shall I start, Kath?
All right, you go first.
There'll be a list here, Darren, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think one of the things that Kath touched on earlier actually is the way that we think it's a real benefit of just having that all the way through. We've talked to people, you know, right from we had to when we did the feasibility stage, so kind of when we decided what we were going to do, we had to go through what they call three-stage business case process. And that's quite a nice opportunity if you think about it. If I put my sort of salesman hat on for a second, you know, no one buys into anything, do they? Unless you go through what I call interest, understanding, and commitment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we aligned those three stages of the business case development process with that kind of logic. So at the first stage, we did a load of engagement with the people who were already engaged with clean air zones, you know, and with improving the air quality of the city. Second stage, we went out to consultation broader, built some understanding amongst the population of what we were doing. You know, third stage, really, this is the detail of the scheme that we're explaining to people. Right, this is what we're doing. This is the charging order. You know, we're at that kind of commitment stage, you know, and we go forward from there. And we used all those stages and then ongoing through implementation to today to literally talk with people, get out there, listen to what they're saying, and essentially make it their scheme as much as we possibly could. You know, at the end of the day, we were directed, we had to do that. But ultimately, we've tried to make this scheme, you know, the people scheme, as it were. It's probably a little bit grand to say that, but you know, as much as we possibly can. I can think if I've sat in with other colleagues, you know, enormous amounts of meetings with bus and coach operators to get an understanding of what their issues were, to try and find a way to address them and work through them, like, you know, with them and all the rest of it. So that consultation piece, that being willing to get out and talk to people and continue to do so is huge for us. I don't think we'd be in this place, Kath, would we, if we hadn't done that?
No, I agree. And, you know, not all those conversations are easy conversations, but you need to have them. And for me, it's really rewarding when you start speaking to someone who is perhaps initially very resistant and angry about what we're proposing, but through talking to them, you gain their understanding. They understand it better, and you know, they come out at the end of that conversation, okay, well, actually it's not that bad, and yes, I see what you're trying to do. And that does take time, but I think it's very productive time to be spent. I think the other thing for me, speaking from sort of an environmental health practitioner background, is that it's very easy when you're sucked into the process of delivering this, you kind of forget, why are we doing this? And we're doing this to improve people's health, and that's something that has to be continually re-emphasized all the way through. And that's difficult because, as we've said, it's not something tangible, but you know, as a local authority, we have to be the voice for those people who perhaps can't articulate their issues, and perhaps who are forced to walk down that busy road every morning with their children on the way to school, be subjected to high levels of nitrogen dioxide. It's those sorts of people that we've got to support and make a stand for. And you know, that's why we're doing this.
So communication is the key.
Yeah.
Thanks for communicating that to us. I mean, I think it's been really helpful, certainly for me and Darren, and I'm sure you know, anybody who's planning this route. Is there anything we've missed that you'd sort of like to sort of add as a closer?
I would also say, from a practical point of view, whatever time you think you need to double it, because there will be things that crop up that you just don't think of, or unknowns, and you need to plan for those.
I would say it's not over when it's over.
No.
So when it's launched, I think I remember we were thinking, oh great, we're going to launch this. We can go and go and have a drink when you could go and have a drink. But no, it continues, and it will continue for a fair bit longer yet. So yeah, the team needs to have some legs. Yeah, right. So you're in it for a while. Yeah.
In some ways, the launch is the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, I suppose so. Yeah. Well done. Anything finally from you, Darren? We've covered everything.
No, just to say thank you. Yeah, thank you to both of you and to BAP as well, the city. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you for your time and for running through exactly how it works and what it means to your city.
And we look forward to working with you as you sort of continue. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.